Hi, I'm going to say something you might find a little bit crazy. I would ask that you bear with me as I'm going to show more and more evidence to support my claim. Uncanny Strike is not the best blessing in the game, and it's not something you should just always take. In fact, most builds, in most situations, would benefit from not having Uncanny Strike and having precognition instead. For the first part of this video, I am only going to show you raw numbers. Then we'll talk about opinions and the like. So, this is the damage on unarmored targets with precognition. I'm sorry, with Uncanny Strike. So, we do 1077 on a normal hit, 1506 on a critical, 1864 on a Zealot Dash critical. Don't worry in case you forget these numbers, I have them all saved right here. Now, let's pull out precog. And I can show you that against unarmored targets, precognition is just better. There's no ifs, ands, or buts about this. Okay, hello, Plague Ogre. So we do 1719 on a normal critical, 1170 on a headshot, 2660. There, it is unarguable. It is objective truth. Precognition will give you more damage versus unarmored targets, every single one of them, which comprises the majority of targets in the game. Now, we will talk in more nuance. Do not worry. There is so much nuance around this topic that you can't just get a good understanding very quickly. So now let's talk about armored targets, because I have a lot to say about proccing both of these and how to actually use both of them. That is not Crusher. Go away. Thank you. Okay, there you go. That's the Crusher. So, unfortunately for Uncanny, we do need two Crushers, which makes this demonstration a bit more tricky to try and consistently pull off. So, we do 1273 on a headshot, 1799 on a critical. Ah, crap. And 2203 on a dash critical. Sorry, you're going to have to forgive stuff like that, because I'm really not good at talking and holding my composure and not saying anything stupid all at the same time. So now, let me show you precognition. Because precognition is going to give me a surprisingly similar amount of damage. So 1065 on a normal hit. Give me a critical. Come on, buddy. 1564 on a critical. And now on a dash critical is where things get interesting. 3144. So, as you can see, precog is actually pretty much able, for the most part, to keep up with Uncanny, though it is just strictly worse. However, there's something you need to consider. Nodes like Duelist or Disrupt Destiny on Psyker that give you weak spot and critical damage, which pairs wonderfully with precog. So, 1299, 2302, and there you just spotted a big problem with Uncanny. As long as you get one critical, you're still able to, as long as you have some form of weak spot and critical increase, consistently two-shot guys like this. But this actually gets even worse for Uncanny, because you can just do this, and one shot. And you get two of those dashes. Now, again, this doesn't mean Uncanny is strictly worse and precog is strictly better. In fact, there is so much nuance around this topic when it comes to that, which we'll get to later. So, if you want for clarity's sake, though, what about Uncanny and Duelist? Now, this is where things get interesting, because it takes about the same number of hits to kill as just, you know, using precog, but you get less damage versus everything else. So we do 1653 against a Crusher normally. We do 1779 versus a Crusher with precog active and Uncanny, or I'm sorry, with Duelist and Uncanny. And this is able to one-shot. It's hard to show this in a controlled environment. This does do 3,600 damage. You'll just have to forgive me for being a shitlord. You are not the person I want to see right now. There you go. 3,600. Okay, so they're both able to one-shot on dash. They're both able to two-shot pretty consistently because at least when it comes to a class like the Zealot or Psyker, you're going to be rocking upwards of 70% crit chance most of the time. So they will consistently two-shot with charged attacks. And if you have anything like a dash that gives you a huge boost of damage, they will consistently one-shot. So they meet, most of the time, the same breakpoints. However, Uncanny Strike versus Armor is strictly more consistent. Now, allow me to showcase an example where Uncanny Strike is just strictly better. Yeah, the crafting update, I didn't, this part is really unscripted and came in right at the very end, so you're going to have to forgive the tier 3 blessings. But if we spawn a Crusher, and then we just apply a bunch of dots, and now we start stacking Uncanny, you're going to see that this does an absolute crap ton of damage. And that gives you a way you can just flame up a Crusher pack while you just keep getting random, poke headshots on them, or just on the Horde, and they will just fall over relatively fast. Uncanny Strike, if you are stacking multiple forms of damage, so you can get multiple means of damage ticking on them, then you will always get a bigger damage increase from Uncanny. You will always get a bigger flat damage increase against armor targets from Uncanny compared to Precog, but you're most of the time going to meet the exact same numbers of hits required to kill as you would with both of the blessings. So, what's actually better? Precog is consistently better versus all the unarmored targets in the game. Uncanny will kill larger packs of armored enemies consistently faster than Precog, though for small packs it really doesn't matter, and for individual instances it almost never matters. And if your build isn't dependent on singular large headshots or criticals, then Uncanny will always be strictly better than Precog. Now, there's actually a little bit more nuance to this, as you saw. So, Uncanny stacks up on hit, whereas Precog procs on dodge. So, if you are playing more defensively, where you're prioritizing taking as little damage as possible, Precog gives you a nice window of massively enhanced damage to capitalize on, whereas Uncanny allows you to run in, never stop attacking. But let's say you're fighting a Plague Ogren, and something like this happens. Just for sake of the argument, let's say he does his stomp. You are not a Plague Ogren. Get the hell out of my video. I don't ever want to see your face again in any game ever. So let's say you're fighting a Plague Ogren, and he stomps, and you go flying. Well, guess what? You almost certainly, not guaranteed, but you almost certainly lost your duelist, or I'm sorry, your precog... Sorry, I need to write a script. You almost certainly lose all of your Uncanny Strike stacks from that. Whereas, with precog, if you manage to get hit, you don't gain any damage anyway, and if you dodged it, you keep the damage, which would be the same for Uncanny Strike as well. The only difference is Uncanny Strike requires 4 hits to even come close to competing to precog, while still clocking in as a lesser damage increase. So really, the use case is more about what your build is trying to specialize on, what you as a player are trying to achieve in your playstyle, and what enemies you expect to fight. If you expect to fight maybe 30 armored enemies throughout the entire mission, and you aren't relying on multiple dots or just raw base damage, there is no reason to use Uncanny Strike. It is objectively worse against all those non-armored targets than Precognition is. As I showed you with the numbers, that is math, that is just hard numerical evidence. If you say you like Uncanny Strike because you find it easier to keep those stacks up than to constantly be dodging, that would be fine. And then it would become the best blessing. There are many cases. You could argue either way. Now, I'd like to talk about the other classes for a second, because Zealot's a bit of a special boy in this case. Veteran has access to a node called Onslaught, which if I pull this up right here for you, Veteran has this node, which allows you to stack up to 40% rending for your entire team. So if you're using any form of a machine gun, this completely negates the need for Uncanny Strike. Onslaught with an auto gun or a recon las gun is going to kill them faster than almost anything else with Uncanny Strike. If not, it will be on par because it can achieve 3600 DPS very easily. The plasma gun can drop a pack of crushers faster than any melee with Uncanny can, and it can do it without even the need for you to, potentially take damage from them. So every class that can utilize Uncanny has methods of killing crushers that are better than Uncanny or at least on par. So if you're using a build where you already have an as good or better way of dealing with crushers or maulers or whatever armored enemy you want, there is no point to use Uncanny because precog will just give you more damage as long as you're critting most of the time than Uncanny will. Which is why on a class like Zealot or Psyker, where you're critting on virtually every hit, it starts to massively outpace Uncanny over the course of a mission. Really, the truth is there is no wrong answer. Uncanny can be much more consistent than precog at the cost of having lower highs. So it has lower lows, lower highs, but it has a more consistent damage increase. Whereas precog has much higher highs. Its lows are higher than the highs of Uncanny, but there is a chance you might not be able to capitalize on it as much. Okay, I think that's just about everything I've ever wanted to say about Uncanny.